Welcome, my friends. We are here today because a brand new Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2 trailer has dropped. For some reason I'm not aware of, Star Trek seems to be dead set on dropping all sorts of information, news, trailers, stories this week instead of either 2 weeks ago during First Contact Day or tomorrow when Picard ends. I feel like that would be a perfect spot to drop this trailer to drum up interest for the next Star Trek show. Maybe that's lending some credence to the fact that there's even bigger news coming after Star Trek ends tomorrow. Maybe we're going to get that announcement of a continuation series, but I digress. I figured I'd give a few thoughts on this trailer here because maybe a few of you are interested. Maybe a few of you saw this trailer and thought, hey, that's looking good, or hey, that's looking like crap. I'm just going to go ahead and share a few things with you here. But first of all, my opinions on Strange New Worlds Season 1 as a whole. And I think while it's not my favorite of the new Star Trek shows, I know for a lot of people it is, and I know for a lot of people it's more of the same, similar to Discovery, and they hate it. For me personally, I thought it was slightly above average. I thought it was definitely a step in the right direction. I enjoy most of the characters. I enjoy a lot of the aesthetics, even though it's not the same as prior Star Trek. And for what they're doing, I really kind of enjoy their episodic take and their slightly less serious tone, although there is a hell of a lot of seriousness going on as well. There's also some downsides, and some of those have to do with the lack of professionalism on the ship, the lack of a command structure, the freewheeling sort of thing that's going on, the interpersonal conflicts that seem to come up and take the forefront of the episodes. But I do need to give a little bit of leeway because that tends to be the way shows are told these days as opposed to the more rigid structure of the older stuff. It just doesn't feel like the classic Star Trek in such a way that I think something like even Prodigy tends to nail. For whatever reason, the modern era of Star Trek seems to have this humongous problem with sidelining or killing off the characters, the newly created characters that have the most potential and work the best. For these, there are going to be a few spoilers, so if you don't want those, bow out now. But I would have to say, in Strange New Worlds, Hemmer, definitely the standout breakout character, at least in my opinion and some of my friends out there. He was definitely the one filled with the most potential, the one we really wanted to see developed, and he was the one sidelined and killed off before the end of the series. He had a few good things to do, he had a few good character interactions, but I feel personally like he was underused in service of giving an emotional storyline and giving a reason for being who she is to Uhura, and obviously making room for an eventual need for Scotty to come in, although it doesn't seem like they're actually doing that. Picard did the same thing. The first two seasons, while fraught with a lot of issues, had Rios, personally my favorite character from those two seasons, and then they got rid of him. Spoilers for Picard Season 3, it seems like they're doing the same thing with Shaw. That remains to be seen. Obviously, we haven't seen the last episode yet. And obviously, he could always be brought back. This is Star Trek, Seven's nanoprobes. However they want to do it, he could come back easily. So that's not really my main point here. It just seems like they are falling flat on utilizing the new characters, especially in a show like Strange New Worlds, which leans so heavily on pre-established legacy characters. There really aren't that many people that could die off. Hemmer, Ortegas, and maybe you could even throw Number 1 in there, are pretty much the only new characters introduced that can die if this is truly supposed to be a 100% prequel to the original series, because basically everyone else has to make it to that original series timeline. So what did I think of the first series? I thought some of the episodes were fun, especially that episodic nature, especially the interesting Strange New Worlds aspect of the show. However, I did find some of the components dragging. I did feel the retelling sort of a little bit of over the top sometimes, and I feel like occasionally they didn't take it too seriously. They didn't come to things with the professionalism I would expect. They didn't come to things with the chain of command I always think needs to be followed a little bit more, and everyone on the ship feels a bit too chummy. And these are things that I feel as if the trailer for Season 2 is kind of bringing back to the forefront. There's a feeling of less than seriousness going on, a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, a little bit like they're winking at the camera. And while that isn't necessarily always a bad thing, I hope that doesn't infect the entire season. I hope there's still stakes, and I hope that these characters can actually go on adventures and come into contact with new strange civilizations, new creatures, and ones we've seen before, but interact with them in a better way. So Season 1 was a good job. In my opinion, I always described it as an open window, a breath of fresh air in this new era of Star Trek, and I feel like they could keep evolving and telling the stories I want to see, but there was definitely room for improvement. Now, some of the things we're seeing in this trailer look fantastic. Obviously, the thing that probably everyone is talking about is the original aesthetic of the Klingons, well, the movie era up through Next Generation forward, because obviously in the original series, the Klingons looked like the smooth-headed makeup people that we saw back in TOS. That was explained in Enterprise, so I can definitely understand there being multiple types of Klingons out there. I probably feel like people would have complained had they gone back to the original series aesthetic anyways, but it's wonderful to see Klingons that look like Klingons, even though the ones shown in this trailer looked a little bit fake. Now, I also like the fact that we got to see our characters interacting a little bit more. Ortegas, I think, is still the one that feels a little too... I guess this is an unfair comparison. She seems a little bit too much like the Deadpool character, the one who's got all of these lines that are supposed to be audience surrogate type lines, the ones like, hey, you need a catchphrase. I don't like that thing in stories these days, especially serious stories like this, where the characters are aware of things that only the audience are aware of. They seem to be coming at this the same way a fan would, ooh, what is this captain's catchphrase going to be, instead of it just being a natural thing within the universe. Obviously, that's probably just played for laughs and it's not a real story element, but these are the things that kind of take me out of the show a little bit. We also saw in this trailer that we're going to be getting number one back on the ship. It looked like there was a little instance of a trial or something when they rang that bell, but it doesn't look like the consequences to her being genetically engineered or her lying to Starfleet all that time is really going to make that much of a difference, because she is seen throughout this trailer in a very prominent role. Another thing we see in this trailer a bit more of is Kirk. Now, I am one of the people out there who is very much in defense of the way that Kirk was portrayed in Season 1 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, because in my opinion, that was an alternate timeline. This was a Kirk who had not gone through all of the experiences that made our version of TOS Kirk the Kirk that we know and love today. He had gone through all sorts of different stuff where Pike was still the commander of the Enterprise, so this Kirk wouldn't necessarily act or even react in the same manner of our James T. Kirk. Now, this is going to become closer to the Kirk we know, so if he acts the same way he did in that alternate timeline, then I will start coming down on him a little bit harder, but for the time being, I am still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to be a good replacement for William Shatner, for lack of a better term. It also appears that Laan is going to be time traveling with Kirk. Now, is this the case, or is this actually going to be one of those alternate evolution planets that just so happens to develop and look exactly like 21st century Earth? I think that might be interesting and that might be a cool twist on it, but if they're actually time traveling back to 2023 or whatever year they would go to, that kind of brings up a couple problems for me, and maybe I'm just way overthinking this, but we saw in the original series and the original series movies, Kirk traveling back to the 60s, traveling back to the 80s, so to have him come back to 2023 now, earlier in his career, before he made those travels, it seems a little less logical for him to be so confused and confounded by 20th century or early 21st century Earth when he had already traveled back in time and experienced that. Small nitpick, I know, but that's just the type of thing that keeps me up at night. I feel like they also showed us a brief glimpse of a fully grown Gorn, and again, I'm a little iffy on all these interactions with the Gorn prior to TOS, but it seems like this is going to be the Strange New World's nemesis, and I suppose I can be okay with that because there really isn't that much establishment of the Gorn in Star Trek, so if they're going to retcon a couple of things, for me personally, it's a little iffy, but I don't feel like this is supposed to be the same exact universe as the original series. Maybe it's one step next door or something, so I don't 100% hate that. If they have to tell their own thing and it's not really impacting anything like major, it's not destroying this huge swath of time, it's something that could be explained away with a little wiggle room, that's where I'm a little okay with them tweaking canon. If they were to suddenly destroy Earth next episode, and that's obviously a huge change to canon, that's the type of stuff that I can't buy. When there's little things like the Gorn being encountered a little early, characters interacting with characters they shouldn't have a little early, that's stuff that I can always kind of justify in my mind. I'm always about these filling in plot holes and filling in story elements, if they're minor enough, with your own brain, because that's part of the fun about watching shows that are more speculative like this. We also get our first glimpse in this trailer of our new engineer, our chief engineer, the replacement for Hemmer, and I can't remember her name in the show, but she's played by Carol Kane. Obviously, that seems like it's going to be a short-term type of replacement. I don't even know if she's going to make it through the season, because maybe she'll die or get transferred and then Scotty will come in. It seems a bit odd to jump through all of these chief engineers from year to year to year, so I'm wondering if she's more of a red herring and she's going to die after 2 or 3 episodes. I hope we get to grow and learn and love her, but she does present a problem because now we've lost our chief alien-looking character. Obviously, we have Spock, we have Laan, we have Number One, but they look, for all intents and purposes, basically exactly like a human. Hemmer was the most alien-looking character we have, and there is a specific line in this trailer by Number One where she says, "Oh, all of these alien cultures working together," or something like that. Every single person in this trailer that's on the crew, maybe a couple of background people excluded, could be mistaken for being 100% human. Obviously, Spock's got the ears, but aside from that, so I think we need to introduce a couple new characters that actually look alien, and without Hemmer, we don't have that. Sure, I know Star Trek historically has mostly had human-looking characters, but now we actually have the technology to include some of these people on the ship, and I think that would be a nice touch. Maybe throw in a couple of characters we couldn't have done in live action back in the day, like the animated series did. Bring in a cat lady, or bring in that crab-looking guy from Eric's or whatever. A creature like that, somebody that's been pre-established in Star Trek canon, who we have not had much chance to see implemented in live action, because we didn't have that technology before. I think that's where Strange New Worlds could shine. Something like Discovery being so far in the future now, if they introduce different looking characters, that's fine, but it's not really feeling like the cohesive universe of an original series-era show like Strange New Worlds. So I think they need to start bringing in more Andorians, bringing in those Tellarites, bringing in maybe a Tholian, obviously not in the Federation or Starfleet, but that would be cool to see an updated version of. Just my thoughts here. Obviously, I talked a hell of a lot more about the show than the actual trailer, but I figured this is just as good a time as any to actually give my thoughts on Strange New Worlds, and while we ramp up to that show, maybe I'll make some more videos on my opinions. I do have some reviews from the last season of it. Tell me all your thoughts. What did you think of the trailer? Are you all in on Strange New Worlds, or is this kind of just another dud for you? What do you think about the new characters and the new settings it appears we're going to be getting? What do you think about the Klingons? What do you think about anything whatsoever, period? The Power Rangers special premiered today, so that's pretty cool too. Leave all of that down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all those fancy YouTube things. And until next time...